All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're looking at one of the most astonishing and, frankly, slightly disturbing developments happening in modern science right now. I mean, we are exploring a space where biology and computer science are colliding in a way that honestly feels like pure science fiction, but I assure you, it is entirely real.
We're going to start right at the absolute peak of the bizarre. I want you to picture a computer sitting in a laboratory called Cortical Labs. It's currently running the classic video game Doom. But here's the thing, nobody is sitting at a keyboard playing it. Or, well, depending on how you look at it, there is a player. They just can't get out. This computer actually runs on living human brain cells, and those specific cells are the ones playing the game. So you're probably wondering, why on earth would anyone build a computer out of living human tissue?
Section 1. The AI Energy Crisis. A race for electricity, not just intelligence.
To understand why this is happening, think about modern AI for a second. It uses an almost unsustainable amount of electricity. I mean, companies are pouring billions into compute power, and the requirements to train these massive models are doubling every 6 months. You literally cannot build power plants fast enough to keep up with the demand. They are actually turning old nuclear plants back on just to power AI. But your brain? It runs on just 20 watts of power. We are using entire power plants to mimic a fraction of what your biological brain does on roughly the power of a dim light bulb.
And then there's the difference in learning efficiency. Think about it. To teach a machine learning model what a dog is, you have to feed it thousands upon thousands of photos. But a human toddler? They see a dog maybe once or twice, and their biological brain just clicks. It gets it. Biological tissue is staggeringly efficient. So researchers started asking a wild question. What if we just use the biology itself instead of trying to digitally copy it?
Section 2. Building a living computer. Decades of biological breakthroughs.
The methodical scientific journey that actually got us here is super fascinating. Back in 2008, researchers successfully grew a sheet of rat neurons and hooked it up to a little robot that the cells actually drove around. Wild, right? But the true game changer happened in 2013 with a scientist named Shinya Yamanaka. He figured out how to take a regular, fully grown skin cell and reset it back to a blank slate. That cell could then be turned into almost anything, including a human neuron. This meant you didn't need to harvest brain tissue at all. You could just grow it from a piece of skin. And by 2022, Cortical Labs combined all these breakthroughs to create DishBrain, growing about 800,000 neurons that successfully learned to play the game Pong.
Now, a really crucial point here is how these cells actually grow. If you just grow them on a flat dish, they only connect to their immediate neighbors. But if you let them grow in 3D, they form what's called an organoid. It's basically a tiny 3D ball of tissue. They naturally organize themselves, they fold into layers, and they form the rough beginnings of real brain regions. But here is the catch. Because the computer chips that scientists use to read these cells are flat grids, researchers currently have to flatten these 3D organoids out. They have to sacrifice that amazing 3D structure just to be able to plug them in and communicate with them.
Section 3. Teaching cells to play. How to train a neuron without a treat.
So how exactly do you teach a flattened blob of cells to play a video game? You definitely can't give a clump of cells a treat for doing a good job. Scientists had to figure out a completely different way to talk to them. So they tapped into something called the free energy principle. This is a biological theory suggesting that every living thing constantly strives to avoid surprises and just keep its world completely predictable. Basically, neurons absolutely hate chaos. If they receive a signal they can't predict, it stresses them out at a fundamental biological level.
And this is exactly how they use that principle to train them. When the cells miss the ball in Pong, the scientists hit them with scrambled random electrical noise, just pure chaos. But when the cells successfully hit the ball back, the signal became calm and steady. The cells themselves have absolutely zero concept of what a video game is. They aren't trying to win a high score, they simply learn to play Pong just to make that chaotic noise stop.
Section 4. The reality of the tech. Separating science fiction from actual code.
Okay, so when Cortical Labs published their Pong research in 2022, they used a really heavy word in their paper's title. They claimed the neurons showed sentience. Well, this specific wording caused a massive backlash. Over 30 scientists signed a letter accusing the company of twisting the word just to generate sensational headlines. And the scientific community was deeply worried. They feared that hyping up sentience could cause a public panic and end up shutting down vital, life-saving research. Because keep in mind, these exact same cell models are used every day to study human diseases and replace animal testing.
To really get to the truth of what's happening, we can just look directly at the code. A developer named Shan Cal actually released the architecture for the Doom-playing setup, which is called CL1. It operates as a hybrid system. First, you have a normal AI computer chip that does the heavy lifting. It reads the screen and decides when to reward or punish. Then, you have the 200,000 living human neurons handling the biological processing. And sitting right in the middle is a translator passing messages between them. Now, it's really easy to assume the computer is doing all the work here, right? But the developer actually ran a test where he removed the living cells and replaced them with random noise. And the result? The learning completely stopped. So those living cells are definitely doing something highly essential.
And the crazy part is, this is moving out of the experimental phase incredibly fast. There's a Swiss company called Final Spark, and they are already running a business where you can literally rent access to 16 living human mini brains right over the internet. You just log in and run your experiments. Their entire pitch revolves around that energy crisis we talked about earlier. These biological chips run on up to 1 million times less power than standard silicon chips. 1 million times!
Section 5. The sentience question. Intelligence versus feeling.
This brings us to the most uncomfortable and undeniably fascinating complication of our explainer. A renowned neuroscientist named Mark Solms proposes a theory that completely flips our usual assumptions upside down. He argues that feeling does not sit on top of intelligence like some high-level cognitive achievement. Instead, feeling comes first. Long before evolution created logic or language, early life just had a basic, fundamental urge to move toward what kept it alive and away from what didn't. Solms believes consciousness is rooted in that exact biological drive to avoid surprise and chaos. Which is incredibly sobering, right? Because that is the exact mechanism, the free energy principle, that scientists are using to train these cells in the lab right now.
So if something in that dish did start to feel, would we even know? Historically, we are notoriously terrible at spotting hidden consciousness. Back in 2006, scientist Adrienne Owen studied a patient who was completely written off as vegetative. But when she was placed in a brain scanner and asked to imagine playing tennis, her brain lit up exactly like a healthy, awake person's would. She was fully conscious, she just had absolutely no way to show it to the outside world. If we can completely miss a conscious feeling human being lying right in front of us in a hospital bed, what chance do we have of spotting it in a tiny clump of cells?
We are crashing headfirst into what the philosopher David Chalmers famously calls the hard problem. We can map every single cell, we can track every electrical pulse, and monitor every single input. But there is absolutely no objective test in the universe that can prove whether these cells are simply turning down their response to block out electrical noise, or if they are actually genuinely suffering.
Think about it. These cells didn't just come from nowhere. They started as ordinary skin from a real, living person. Now, we didn't set out to create human sentience in a dish. We just wanted to save electricity. But as we push forward to solve the AI energy crisis by wiring up living human tissue and blasting it with chaos until it learns, we really have to ask a deeply unsettling question. So I'll leave you with this final thought to take away. As we build these living computers, are we accidentally trapping a sliver of consciousness inside an endless loop of doom?